Hello friends, my name is Shilpa Kakkar. I'm from M.B.Patel English Medium Secondary and Higher Secondary School. Today, I'm here with chapter number 5 of History, the Mutiny of 1857. I have already discussed the initial topics in my previous two sessions. Now this is the last session of the Mutiny of 1857. Let us discuss the remaining part of this chapter. Causes of the failure of the revolt. There are many reasons responsible for this failure. The first reason was no effective central leadership. Actually, people were not disciplined, and there was quite indiscipline among the rebels, and that was the weakness. Soldiers were behaving as per their discretion. Soldiers even neglected the commands of their leaders and behaved irresponsibly. In Allahabad, Delhi, Kanpur, Jhansi, they did not follow the orders of their leaders. It had an adverse effect on the people's mind and chaos created. Some of the kings and zamindars had not followed the instructions wholeheartedly given by Tatya Tope and Lakshmi Bai. Lakshmi Bai was expert leader, but as she was a woman, her suggestions were not executed. Tatya Tope was also not accepted as a leader. Another reason for the failure was limited uprising. The revolt fairly widespread. A large part of the country remained unaffected by it, and that is why it led to the failure. Third reason was kings and princes were with Britishers. Many kings were not present, did not support the revolt. Nizam of Hyderabad, Raja of Kashmir, kings of Patiala, Nabha, Sindh, Sindhya, Gaikwad, the kings of Bhopal, all these people, they did not support the revolt. And that is why it led to the failure. The next reason was the weaknesses of rebels. The revolt was an unorganized effort when compared to the organization of the British. Except the Queen of Jhansi Lakshmi Bai and Tatya Tope, they had no effective leadership. On the other hand, the British had effective and experienced leadership of the Lawrence brothers, Havelock, Neil Nicholson. They strongly contributed to suppress the mutiny. The British army was more powerful in artillery and infantry than the rebellion troops. Their naval wing was very strong. The rebels were lacking all these facilities, and that is why that led to the failure. Railway and telegraph system proved very useful to the British in transporting soldiers and materials, and that is why Indians could not succeed. Another reason for the failure was the modern educated Indians did not support the revolt because they could not rise from the age-old customs. The educated felt the Britishers to be the sign of modern age, so they acted neutrally. Another reason was lack of goal and patriotism. This was one of the major reasons of the failure of the mutiny. The rebels wanted to re-establish Mughal Empire, but Sikhs and educated groups, they were against it. They did not want to re-establish medieval dictatorship. The major thing was that the early onset of revolt. Actually, 31st May 1857 was fixed for onset of mutiny, but accidentally it began on 29th March 1857. Because of it, the revolt did not become as successful as they thought. Mr. Malson, one of the historians, noted that if the mutiny began on the fixed date all over India, definitely the rule of East India Company would have come to an end at that time. So these were the causes of the revolt, of the failure of the revolt of 1857. Opinions of various historians and scholars about the revolt. There are many controversies about format of mutiny and the revolt. Many historians believed that it was the mutiny of soldiers only, and in some part of the country it had taken the form of public revolt. Some of the historians stated that this revolt was only the revolt of soldiers. People from England, the diplomats, believed and found this revolt as a political and religious upheaval, revolt against the British rule. Some historians even stated that if it had taken by everyone, then it would have changed the result. Indian historians and leaders summarized that this revolt, as the first war for independence. Even Dr. Rajendra Prasad rightly stated that it could not be said to be only the mutiny of soldiers, but the rebellion of people also. So there are many opinions regarding the revolt of 1857. But we can say that it was not only the mutiny of sepoys, because in all the centers the soldiers had started it, and later rebel leaders such as Mughal Badshah Bahadur Shah Zafar, Nana Sahib, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Hazrat Mahal, Zeenat Mahal, they all joined the mutiny. So, others also, local public also, participated actively in this mutiny. So it is not right to say that it was just sepoy mutiny. Another thing is that it was a great uprising. The sepoy mutiny can be considered more than a revolt and less than a freedom movement. This was the first major uprising against the British, which was initiated by the sepoys. The idea of patriotism did not take full shape during this time. But the sepoys understood the humiliation suffered at the hands of Britishers, the arrogance of the British masters, and their inhuman attitude. Hence, in this regard, this revolt can be considered as the first war of independence against the British Empire, inspiring future freedom fighters. Let us discuss the results of the 1857 revolt. There are various opinions among the historians about the mutiny of 1857, but it undoubtedly left a far-reaching impact on the future of the people. First thing that happened after the revolt of 1857 was the end of East India Company rule. British Crown took over and replaced East India Company because it brought many changes in the policies of administration. In the proclamation of Queen Victoria in November 1858, the glimpses of these changes were revealed. There were many administrative changes also. In 1861, a law was passed for Indian Assembly. According to this, in this new assembly, Indians were given positions for the first time. Thus, slowly, the government became constitutional instead of dictatorial. Another change that took place were the changes in the policy towards princely states. The doctrine of lapse was abolished. They gave assurance to the kings to keep their rights, their dignity, their ancestors' rights, and the rights to adopt sons. All these things were snatched away. All these rights were snatched away by Dalhousie. But after the revolt of 1857, they were again given back to them. So, the King of Kingdoms became faithful to the Britishers. Again, that was a political move by the British. Another thing was that they started giving equal opportunity in jobs to Indians. After this mutiny, they had started appointing Indians on higher posts according to their qualifications. They restructured. They appointed more British soldiers and minimized the number of Indian soldiers. The Britishers formed Sikh, Gurkha, Pathan, and Rajputana regiments. Indian soldiers were unarmed and all of them were posted far from their native places, as they knew that if anything of that sort will happen again, it would not be possible for them to control Indians this time. So this was again a very smart move by the British. Another result was the change in the economic policy. Some of Indian industries like iron and cloth were promoted. Britishers' economic policy was formed to give benefits to the Britishers at the expense of India and Indians. Yet, iron and cloth industries were given importance. Exploitation of artisans and common public increased. Roads and railways and telecommunications were developed, but it was developed just for the benefit of Britishers. There were changes in the social policies also. The British government implemented the policy of divide and rule and continuously instigated communalism in India after the mutiny. At the social level, the government began a constructive policy rather than a development policy to stop progressive forces. We can see the changes in the religious policy also. Britishers had brought major changes after the mutiny. They became neutral over the religious issues and stopped giving support to Christian missionaries. They also took care not to hurt religious feelings so that religious leaders and conservative forces would support them. After the mutiny of 1857, the medieval age ended and began the modern age in India. Under the British rule, modern nationalism and development started. As a result of this, the Gandhian era began that ousted the Britishers from the country and India gained independence. Students, here we end with this chapter. We have divided this chapter into 3 sessions. Go through all the 3 sessions collectively and try to understand it again. Read the text, you will understand in a better way. Thank you.